appears to be self-evident
that all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office, experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
For insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all, in-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths.
We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back, folks, to the greatest podcast you've ever heard. If you haven't given it 5 stars, I'm not sure what you're doing. Look, I know how many people download each episode. If all of you gave me 5 stars, I'd have more stars than Ben Shapiro. That would be really cool. Okay. Not that I'm competing with anybody or anything. I just am. So I am very honored to have with me former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. Paul, thank you so much for being on. I'm not sure that I need to go. I usually do a long introduction and bio for people. People know who you are, but maybe tell us what you're up to now.
Yeah. Hey, good to be with you, Dan. I am not baking in the sun like you are down in Houston.
It's raining all the time right now.
Yeah. So you guys need more of those aqueducts there. You guys have a hard time getting your water to.
We're working on it. We're working on it.
You need the third reservoir. I know issues. You need the third reservoir built. Yeah. So I do a lot of fun stuff, and that's the great thing about being, out of government, out of Congress. I get to do what I want to do. I work. I do some private sector stuff. I do some boards and speeches. But my vocational portfolio consists of I teach in the economics department at Notre Dame. I'm a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute working on a few discrete projects there. And I have a charitable foundation called the American Idea Foundation, which is focused on center-right free market poverty policies. And all of these things I do give me the ability to schedule my time how I want to. So I'm making up for a lot of lost family time. I've done more stuff with my family in the last 2 years than I did in the prior, 8 combined probably.
I bet you're happier.
It's awesome. Yeah, definitely. That was part of my problem. When you in government, there are some jobs I think are sort of better for empty nesters, like Speaker of the House. I wasn't an empty nester. Was really happy to have done the job, honored to have done it, enjoyed it. But I sort of had a ticking clock, which was kids in high school, flying the coop before too long. Mm-hmm. I still have 2 left in high school. Our daughter just finished her freshman year in college. So I'm just making up for a lot of lost time, and I'm doing fun stuff, and I work on projects that I care about.
Yeah.
So it's really fun.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, I think this job in Congress is fulfilling, and it's a mission. I'm a very mission-oriented person, but people always ask, are you enjoying it? I'm like, it's not really the right question. I enjoyed being in the SEAL teams. I know every once in a while I get blown up, but I truly enjoyed it. It's just a very different world. It was also fulfilling. That's all I ever wanted to do. This is also fulfilling. It's a mission. It's important. I want to jump right into it. So just for the listeners, we're going to talk about anti-poverty measures from the conservative angle. This is Speaker Ryan's expertise on many levels. As you say, you teach about it, you work on it, you have a foundation on it. Foundation, I think, is the right word to use here. When you're teaching your students, what kind of foundational research do you give them? Foundational readings? Where do we start as conservatives? I mean, you and I have talked about this before. We need to be able to understand multi-layers deep why we believe what we believe, because it's founded in a lot of truth and a lot of history. So maybe give us some quick insights onto what you might assign people.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think it's important that conservatives understand the rudimentary, irreducible primary principles in the moral code on which we operate. That makes sure that when we do engage in populism, meaning try to be more popular, it is tethered to principles. It is populism rightfully directed because it flows from consistent principle. It's not just running around loose, doing whatever popular will occurs. And so I do worry that sometimes we forget about conservatism when pursuing populism. That's another comment for a political discussion.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, so I teach in the economics department at Notre Dame. I also serve on the board of something we call the Laboratory for Economic Opportunity, which is basically poverty economics, using econometrics and economic tools like randomized control trials to prove techniques of getting people out of poverty. At the core of this, one of the classes I taught the last year that I really enjoyed was the morality of capitalism, Catholic social teaching, and free market economics. I had students read authors like Michael Novak, a prominent Catholic theologian and free market advocate and devotee. He recently passed away, because I do believe that there is a moral core foundation to capitalism. And my argument is that free enterprise is the best weapon against poverty. And that's a timely conversation, given the fact that we had this sort of fetish with socialism. We had this sort of young person romantic attachment to the fashionable, idea of socialism. But when you actually just scrape below the surface of socialism, realize it is just basically conformity, no choices, and enforced poverty. And it's just misery. It's sank economies from Eastern Europe to Latin America and everywhere in between. And so free enterprise, classical liberal economics is really what gets the individual moving. So at the core, I think you have to understand what natural rights are and natural law. So we study natural law, natural rights, and the foundation of free market economics that comes from that. You can go to the Renaissance and read Adam Smith. You can read John Locke. You can read the founders, frankly. And there's a lot that you can get from these classical economists. You can also look at the Austrians, Mises, Hayek. You can go to the Chicago School, Milton Friedman, Bob Mundell. So there's a lot of good writing that is out there. I think Michael Novak is one of the authors that I sort of point to in my classes, who sort of distilled all of this. And frankly, it's a Catholic university and I'm a Catholic, so we do it through that lens, but that's not necessary. The basic idea of natural rights and natural law, which is the foundation of America, is our rights come from God, not from government. They're pre-government. They're ours as individuals. And so that view is anti-identity politics, it's anti-collectivism, it's pro-individualism and pro-free market. And that view, combined with a moral code that we believe in as human beings, that at a Catholic university, I teach it through Catholic social teaching, allows you to enjoy the fact that a free market economy rests on a moral foundation based on natural rights and natural law, with a Bill of Rights and individual rights and a constitution designed to protect these rights so that we are free to design and run our own lives, and that we believe in local control and local government and federalism. We call this subsidiary as Catholics. All of that gives you a moral understanding of a society that gave us the greatest country in humankind, that gave us this enormous American experiment, where our foundation, which my foundation describes as the American idea, the condition of your birth doesn't determine the outcome of your life. That American creed and American idea is the most revolutionary thing we've ever had as human beings. Mm-hmm. It is the one thing that ran contrary to all other ways societies organize themselves, mostly through the coercion of collectivism. And it's easy to defeat these things, I think. And the progressive left is trying to pull us back toward the same old tired ideas of collectivism and socialism, which has, created a lot of rot in a lot of societies. The last point I'll say is to have a free society like we designed, a constitutional republic, it does require truth. It does require morality. Washington said it best in his exiting, farewell address. We built a system of natural law and natural rights and a constitutional republic with individual rights, which sort of requires a moral society, a moral country. And so it's important that we as individuals keep civil society big and growing so that we can keep ourselves tethered to truth and to individual moral codes, so that we can enjoy the gift of freedom that this country has given us, that you fought for as a sailor, in the SEALs.
Those are all. I love all that. I mean, I'll just add and emphasize your point on the basis of morality, and whether you're an atheist or a Catholic, you can't
Right.
deny that America was founded on Judeo-Christian values. People are like, "Well, I'm a good person. I don't have to believe in God to be a good person. That's true, but big but. You grew up in a Western civilization that is founded on these values, whether you like it or not, and that's a good thing. And maybe a little appreciation for that might be in order. And the last thing I'll say is that the left is always saying, well, Jesus was a socialist. See, they like to take a lot of the things you're saying and say that's exactly why we need to spend more money on people because of our morality, right? So they twist these things. It's easy to be a leftist. The arguments are unbelievably easy because you can always find imperfections in a society and use that as an excuse for that collectivism that you talk about. And this is the battle we always fight on as conservatives. Our base is always really upset because we're always on defense. And I, you know what? I just tell them, look, you're a conservative. Get used to it. You're always on defense. That's the entire point of being a conservative. So deal with it. Stop complaining. You're not a victim. They're like, why do we go on offense? It's because we're not crazy activists. That's why. So, okay, we're on defense, and that's the point. And the last thing I'll say is this whole Jesus is a socialist nonsense flies in the face of Jesus' teachings. He didn't say, he said you should give charity, not demand that somebody else gives charity. And also this notion of collective guilt is really important. This gets a little philosophical, but it's really important to note that the Bible's teachings are you are guilty for your sins. You are responsible. The essence of personal responsibility is unbelievably important in Jesus' teachings. Collectivism is not. You're not responsible for the sins of your father. But this is exactly what the left teaches. It's completely the opposite of Jesus' teachings. And so maybe I just kind of want you now to move on to, speaking of charity, speaking of helping the poor, which is certainly what Jesus taught. What are our solutions to that? What's the framework we should think about anti-poverty programs? And then I want to get into some specifics with you on opportunity zones and the tax credits, the EITC tax credit and all of that. Yeah.
So I'll pick up where you just left off, which is, and I've had this conversation for years with constituents and people around the country. The question is, do we have a country that is wired to produce or promote equality of opportunity? The answer is yes. Or do we want to change this country to promote equality of outcome, which is really socialism, which is antithetical to our founding creed, to our Constitution? And I would argue strongly that promoting equality of opportunity is the goal of America. That is the goal of our government and our society. And we should maintain that and not substitute it for equality of outcome, because the kind of government you have to do that is radically different than what we have. And the last point you said about collectivism and the guilt by association, identity politics is going to be the undoing of the American creed if we allow it to take root. And that means the left has always practiced identity politics. What worries me most these days is the right now is flirting with it also for populist means that are untethered to core principles. So if we believe in this sort of group resentment or tribe against tribe, then we will lose sight of the entire moral premise of America and natural rights and our Constitution and our framing of our society. So I just want to punctuate the point you just made. And so that brings us to public policy. And can we strive for a system of dynamic upward mobility where we promote the equality of opportunity so everybody gets a shot at having the best version of their life, that at rising to wherever they want to go and wherever they can go, limited only by their God-given talent and their own effort? That's the kind of society we want to achieve. That's what America is sort of wired for. And so there are lots of techniques and programs and policies that can do that, but they also must respect the inherent dignity of each individual person. They must respect the dignity of local government, of local people, of communities. De Tocqueville did a great job of looking at how America was so special and unique by having civil society where you had local connective tissue, where people just kind of helped each other, where people, because we respected people were having more control of their lives and their communities, could do more with each other. And that civil society made people better people because they helped each other volitionally, voluntarily, by choice. And so going into tax credit and policy and all of these things, all of these policies that have proven to be effective, I think they capture this dynamic, which is they enable people to to make better lives for themselves, to help each other, to rise, and to rise the income scale, to pursue this beautiful notion of upward mobility, where you can be better off than your parents and your kids can be better off than you. That's a great idea in this country. So we can go through the litany of different proposals. I think what we've had in the poverty space, and this is one of the things that I sort of matured through the system as I looked at this.
And it's important to know for the audience, like, you traveled around the country just really searching for solutions. This isn't some think tank ivory tower commentary. No. You really were on the ground for many, many years. This is your passion. It's important to note that.
Yeah, my mentor was Jack Kemp, so I spent some time as a young guy staffer, going through, public housing places like Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor Homes in Chicago, and sort of seeing how the poverty industrial complex and the war on poverty actually backfired in so many amazing ways, in a bad way. And so I spent years running around the country, mostly with my friend Bob Woodson, learning about poverty, seeing poverty, exploring poverty, getting out of Janesville, Wisconsin and Kenosha, Wisconsin, where I'm from, and learning about poverty in poor rural areas and poor inner cities, and did this for a number of years to just educate myself, to try and understand this issue better, to come up with better solutions.
And one thing,
go ahead.
Is the different types of poverty something that strikes you? One of the, I saw a Bloomberg study, and I know it's Bloomberg, but like they do have sometimes good studies. And this one has just, what it really got down to was the many, many different types of poverty. Because there's intergenerational poverty, right? There's poverty because you're a one-parent household. There's poverty because there's mental illness. And, how do we construct policy based on the many different facets of poverty? And I tend to think, as a conservative, you probably agree that simple solutions for complex problems are generally the best. But, how does that inform your thinking? And what did you find?
Yeah, I do agree with that. There are different kinds of poverty. Mostly, there's situational poverty, there's momentary poverty. I focus on intergenerational poverty, the most stubborn form of poverty.
Okay.
Which is poverty in areas that have only known poverty for many generations. It's passed on from generation to the next. And a lot of the problem there is basically bad government policies. So what I learned in my career as a policymaker, both in Washington and policy fights, but also just touring the country studying poverty, is we were measuring it the wrong way, number one. When I was head of the budget committee, I did a year-long study on commemorating the 30th anniversary of the war on poverty. And I wanted to learn, okay, so we've just spent about $15 trillion on a lot of different programs. What are we getting for it? Is it working? It took us a year, literally, to get a taxonomy of all that the federal government does. So I had my entire budget committee staff and Congressional Budget Office and General Accountability Office spend a year studying all that the federal government does on poverty. There was no listing of this. There was no accounting of this. So we basically did that. We basically concluded, right now, rounding to current numbers, we spend about $1 trillion a year on anti-poverty efforts and programs for the federal government on just a little less than 100 programs.
Wow.
And we never measured success based on results or outcomes. We measured success based on input and effort. How much money are we spending? How many programs do we have? How many people are on those programs? So it was all effort-based measurement. And we never studied evidence based on, is it working? Are we getting people out of poverty? Are we breaking the cycle of multi-generational poverty? Those questions weren't even asked. And so what we tried to do is switch the debate to a results-oriented debate. And as I got into this fight, I found myself into a bunch of ideological clashes. And when you have ideological clashes, left versus right, unless you totally control Washington, 60 votes in the Senate, a hardcore majority in the House, and a president of your own party, which almost never happens, you're just going to have a big stalemate. And so we had lots of stalemates. We got welfare reform in the mid-'90s. I was a staff guy. I worked on the issue at the time. And every now and then we would get a victory. Opportunity zones, welfare reform, here and there. Mm-hmm. But we basically had stalemates. I basically decided, let's go use the field of economics, which is something I've spent my career in, and see if we can get past the stalemates to something a little more antiseptic and a little less ideological, which is let's just use the field of economics. So I wrote a law called the Evidence Act, which is literally the last thing I did when I was Speaker of the House. I passed it in the lame duck session of 2018. Trump signed it in 2019. My co-author was Patty Murray, a friend of mine who I normally disagree with on almost everything, who I just know real well. She's a liberal senator from Washington. And the Evidence Act basically takes the approach of let's use the field of economics to study outcomes, to see whether or not it works or not. And there are one or two programs that the federal government now has that are evidence-based policy programs. This Evidence Act, I think, will give us a whole new field of social science in government and out of government where we actually measure whether or not these poverty programs work or not. Do they achieve their stated goals of getting people out of poverty? And then we can leapfrog the ideological stalemate of, dependency versus independence and all of these things.
When could we expect a report on that we in Congress could use as a...
Yeah, so you need to write it on OMB. OMB, and this is like when Mick Mulvaney and Russ Vought were running the place. Those guys were doing a good job of helping make sure the law gets executed. But it was just literally at the end of this last administration. So now we need, with this current administration, OMB to keep pushing this through. And by all measurements, they're doing that. So we now have access, society, academics, universities, and the government, to this raw data on the effectiveness of poverty programs that we have to push through so we can actually measure the effectiveness of these programs. What we do at Notre Dame is we also run randomized control trials through our Notre Dame economics department on poverty programs to see, does it work or not? At the end of the debate here, I'm a confident conservative. I believe our principles work. I believe thrift. I believe work. I believe incentives, intact families, all those things work to get people out of poverty. If you have your high school diploma, if you have, parents staying together, raising their kids, statistically, that helps keep you out of poverty. So I'm a person who believes let's just submit these programs to a raw clinical analysis, economically rigorous analysis, and I think it will validate our principles, and that will make it easier for us to sort of, have policy fights that are settled by data and evidence versus ideology and partisanship. And I think we'll start moving the needle on poverty. What it invariably means is you can't lose the secret sauce of local control, of federalism, of incentives, of personal responsibility, and all the things that come with that. And so our goal and hope, and this is what we do at my foundation, what we study and teach at Notre Dame, and it's what the Evidence Act ultimately hopes to achieve, is that we start measuring success in the war on poverty based on outcome and results, not based on input and dollars spent, so that we can actually transition dollars from ineffective, wasteful programs that are counterproductive to efforts that actually get people up and out of poverty, and we start breaking the cycle of poverty, going at root causes of poverty. And that's the whole goal of all of this.
And also too complex. And when you got 90 plus programs, there's a lot of potential problems. The way the program is designed, the benefit cliffs, how the programs interact, misaligned incentives, but complexity. My God, you're in poverty and you got to navigate this system. I don't understand how on earth you would do it. Look, I'm not an expert on this like you are, but generally what I say about this is, look, let's simplify the hell out of this. Why do we have 90 different programs? Look, if you are in poverty and we have ways of measuring that, just use the earned income tax credit, and we can expand that if possible. Why do you have different programs for housing, for healthcare, for food? It's hell to it's already hell being in poverty. So why do we add to that hell by making it so complex? And I'm like, I always have to, healthcare is my specialty. And so I talk about it in terms of this. I'm like, why are we subsidizing insurance companies or institutions when we should be subsidizing the patient? Like, we believe everybody needs healthcare. Okay. It's not technically a right the way the left says it is, but forget it. That's just splitting hairs on vernacular. Or, but we do agree on, we want everybody to have it. I do agree with that. Just like I agree with the fact that I think everybody should have access to food. Okay, but we don't say go to the grocery store, pick out what you want,
Right.
don't know the price, go through the cashier, and that cashier just bills the government. That would be crazy, right? We give you a voucher, we empower you, the customer, and you go buy food for yourself. Why is healthcare any different? Health savings accounts would be the first step to that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because I have
I wrote
such
the law.
limited. I know. I have such limited time with you.
HSAs was my amendment to the '03 Medicare bill. So I wrote the HSA law as an amendment to the '03 Medicare bill. So I spent many years on that particular topic, including writing that. But it's the same concept effectively that you use in HSA. So again, as the guy who wrote the HSA law, or as the guy who wrote this Evidence Act, they all flow from the same principles, which we were talking about before, which is upper mobility, natural rights, being in control of your life, and running government through the person, running support through the individual, not in a top-down way, through a collectivist kind of a scheme that treats everybody the same. And to your point, this is something I'm working on at AEI, which is, without getting ahead of where we're going with this thing, I believe you can collapse the poverty programs into a radically simplified version of what they are that is so much more easy to navigate for an individual, and do it in such a way that is designed in the right way so that it's not complex, that it doesn't have benefit cliffs that tell you don't keep advancing in life. That's what benefit cliffs do. They actually make it harder to rise. And incentivize the right kind of behavior, like thrift, saving, personal responsibility, work, family formation, things like that. And there are tools in front of us, like the EITC and the CTC. I think that could be used to do that. We can wrap them around that.
Give the audience a quick, 30-second lesson on EITC and the pitch for opportunity zones. And again, we have such limited time. And then I want to move to a talk of politics in Congress and your experience on that in our last few minutes.
Best idea that there is in fighting poverty that exists today is the earned income tax credit. It's Milton Friedman actually designed the idea. He called it a negative income tax at the time. And so it basically says it pays to work. The earned income tax credit means you get a tax credit for working, so it layers on top of your paycheck. Now, it's got to be improved in its design because it's a lump sum at the end of the year. It should actually be embedded in your paycheck, so it shows that work really does pay. That is the best way to get over these benefit cliffs, which is, as you rise the income scale, you lose certain benefits. And sometimes taking 2 steps forward in earning an income, you can take 3 steps back by losing benefits. Yeah. The EITC is one of the better things that we have to help get over that hump. So the EIT and the child tax credit just helps families who have children, pay for the fact that you have children, and then there's extra costs involved, so that you can help with family formation. We have demographic issues we need to address, meaning, we don't want to be like Japan and Europe, where we're cutting ourselves in half every generation with a 1.2 birth rate. We want to be able to, produce, a good birth rate that keeps a dynamic growing society. So we can go down those rabbit holes. The point of it all is I believe that there are new techniques to fighting poverty that give us better tools that encompass our principles, that make good on the American idea. And I really do believe with technology, with the digital money, programmable money, with the kinds of technologies that are out there now, we can design a safety net, a poverty safety net that truly helps people rise and make the best choices in their life and become the best versions of themselves, and not have a cohort of dependency.
Right.
We don't want to trap people in poverty. Right now, what the left is basically saying is, you're stuck in your current station in life, and we'll just give you some more government to help you cope with it.
Yeah, and Republicans are evil. They don't want to give you more money.
Yeah, that is what the left is proposing. What we believe is, in this country, we want to give you the best chance at the best life you can have for yourself, and give you an equality of opportunity so that you can make the most of your life. And that's the tool we want to equip you with, so that you can stand on your own 2 feet and be proud of what you can achieve, and have a life where your kids can even do even greater than you did. That's the whole American idea in a nutshell. And we can do better policies, I think, with technology and economics that we have never seen before to kind of accomplish this goal.
And I think it's a great message for 2022. Like, there's a lot of sections of policy that we need to just take offense on: healthcare, environment, anti-poverty. It's just not a bad message, right? We want to simplify the program, so it's already hell being in poverty. I've already made up the lines in my head. It's already hell being in poverty, but shouldn't be hell navigating the system. And Republicans want to help you rise out of poverty, not survive in it.
That's right.
And that's exactly what Democrats want. They want you to survive in poverty, and they call that compassion. No. I want you to rise out of it. All right, but for us to win in 2022, we got to get our shit together. Okay, excuse my French, but it is my podcast, and I can say whatever I want. So, unless I get censored by the speaker because it's my official podcast, whatever. Let's move on.
I'm sort of known for not swearing. Everybody would give me a hard time in leadership because I just don't. I'm
it doesn't. It wouldn't work with you. It wouldn't come out right. You're just too nice. Okay, look, we got to get our shit together. There's divisions in the party. I don't think they're quite as bad as the media likes to say they are, but it's not nothing. And you've got like the let's call it the Cheney wing on one side, and you got all the others on the other. There's a lot on the other side. I find it all to be melodramatic and theatrical, and I make that point quite often. But it's important to note for people, and I've talked about this often, what are the different types of members of Congress, and how do you navigate that as Speaker of the House? It's like herding cats. It is a job I will never want. I will never run for Speaker of the House. I'll say that right now.
I never wanted it either. It's not. So the job found me. I didn't look for the job. There are two paths people take in Congress. There's the policy path, and there's the leadership path, which is more of a political thing. I chose the policy path. I wanted to be chair of the Budget Committee. Then I wanted to be chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Those are the goals I set for myself. I achieved those goals. I was happy as a clam as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee when John Boehner kind of went down, left. Then Kevin didn't have the votes to become speaker. And then it kind of came to me. And if I didn't do the job, we were basically going to implode as a majority because no one else had the votes. So I did it under those circumstances, which was not, meaning I wasn't looking for it. I did it under two conditions. We have an agenda that we've assembled together, that we believe in, that we run on. So we run an election that is a choice election, not a referendum, a choice election. So that if we win, then the policies we ran on, we've earned the moral authority to execute those policies. We called it the better way. And number two, I just want to be home on weekends because of my kids. And that proved to be harder as time went on because only the speaker can raise the kind of money you need to raise for your majority in your team. And so I ended up just the job conflicted with the family just too much at the end of the day.
And what's interesting is I believe it's I could be wrong on this. I wasn't around, but I thought it was the Freedom Caucus that said, no, we want Paul Ryan in there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Because you've always been a hardcore, hardcore is maybe not the right word, but a very principled conservative on these issues, on things that Freedom Caucus certainly cares about. What's interesting, though, is I think fundamentally the Freedom Caucus is actually anti-establishment. And this became more apparent to me as I've and I have friends. I think it's not. I'm not saying it's bad. It just is. That's mostly what they believe. And we got to this point on the right, and this is what's screwing us: is this kind of visceral reaction, without defining it, against the establishment, against the rhinos. Yeah. Now, I always make fun of people. I'm like, "Are you going to go rhino hunting? Get your rhino gun out. Hunt those rhinos. Whatever." I don't use the term. I never campaigned on it because it's stupid. And it's causing serious divisions. And you talk about the difference in Congress between policymakers and entertainers. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I think there are people who focus more on temperament and tactics than on, actual, policies and principles. There are two qualities every politician more or less has inside of themselves. They want to be somebody and they want to do something, a beer versus a doer. Each person in politics has more of one than the other. And the person who comes to Congress because they want to be somebody, be famous, be a congressman, be on TV, be a senator, be a whatever, that's the person that is coming in what I call the entertainment wing of the party. The entertainment wing of the party is a newer wing of the party. And what I mean when I say that is in the old days, like 10 years ago, if you wanted to succeed in politics, especially at the national level and like in Congress, you had to scale a meritocracy, and the meritocracy you scaled, like I said, this is how I rose because it was how anyone rose. You had to prove yourself, and we measured success by persuasion and innovation. Could you create good, innovative policies that solve problems? And could you persuade people these were the best policies? Your constituents, your colleagues, your country. My budgets were a good example of those in the early 2000s that I wrote. And then that was how you rose. And you had to put a lot of time in. I mean, I did 10 terms in the House. So, I became speaker in my 8th term. So, and it's because I rose the sort of meritocracy leg. But because of decentralized information, because of digital platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, cable, talk radio, you name it, there arose an entertainment wing of the party where people realize, oh, I don't have to put in decades or years scaling the meritocracy. I can just be really good on TV. I can give barn burner speeches, be awesome on Twitter and on Facebook and have really good followers and entertain. And I can leapfrog the entire meritocracy and I can become famous real fast. And that fame gets me power. It gets me the ability to raise money online. It gives me exposure. So I can leapfrog these guys who are policymakers and be a player right away. I mean, the ultimate entertainer, Donald Trump, got the nomination in 2016 and he beat Ted Cruz, who came in second for the nomination. And Ted was in Congress, 2 years before he did that. So what I'm saying is that there is a new dynamic and incentive structure that says you can entertain your way faster to the top of the field than work your way through a meritocracy. And the entertainment wing basically measures its success by provocation and entertainment. Can you provoke and can you entertain?
Yeah.
And invariably, that's going to require you to eschew and prevent common ground, compromise, to do the kind of legislating the founders envisioned when they built the system, the separation of powers, the bicameral legislature. All of those things were designed to bring people together to reach consensus to govern as a country. If your goal is to win and scale the entertainment wing of either party, and both parties have entertainment wings, because we now hang out in our informational cul-de-sacs. We are enforcing our bias because of where we choose to get our information. That's just how society works these days. Then you have to be against compromise. You have to call a less perfect conservative a rhino. You have to do those things. And more importantly, it is based on basically not policies or principles, but based on tactics and temperament. It is based on populism. Populism, what worries me is untethered to principles. And so it basically is a temperamental thing, which is I'm going to scale the entertainment wing by being more populist than the next person. And I have to go against, watering myself down, compromising, pushing certain, conservative policies that may not be popular. Look, I got to tell you, taking on the entitlement programs, Medicare, Medicaid, I authored all the Social Security reform bills in the early 2000s. Those weren't popular. And so I still feel they were necessary, though, if we're going to escape a debt crisis,
Well,
so
populism is telling people what they want to hear, not the truth. That's what I firmly believe populism is. I don't know why it's gained popularity as a word, as a term in our party. It shouldn't. Right? That's how you get to $2,000 checks for everybody, even if they've never lost their job. I know that we are right up against your next thing. So unless you're willing to give me another 30 minutes, because I could talk your ear off forever, I really appreciate this, Paul.
You bet. Dan, nice to see you. Yeah, time went by fast. I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, you were on a roll. That's why I was like, I don't want to stop you, but I don't want to screw up your schedule. I might add a lot to what you just said for the audience, but I know you've got to go.
All right, man. Good to be with you.
Really appreciate it. Appreciate your service. Speaker Paul Ryan, thank you.
Thank you. See you.
So Speaker Ryan had to go, but Worth, God, he said a lot of good things there, and I want to expand upon it a little bit. And my thoughts on this, you've probably heard them before, but it strikes me that that's completely right. There's policymakers, there's legislators, there's statesmen, these boring guys who they're not boring, they're cool, but they know their policy and they're helpful to us. They're what we want up there. They're not exciting. They don't tweet. And it's very easy for a lot in our base to say, oh, they're not fighters. They're not doing anything for us. What do you mean they're not doing anything for you? They're writing the policy that you say you believe in. Meanwhile, we do have people who are pure entertainers. Now, look, I jump out of freaking airplanes for ads. Like, obviously, I fall into that wing. I'm self-aware here, but there's the problem becomes when that's the only thing you do. If you're a fan of this podcast, you know I also dive pretty deep into every single policy issue, every single one. That's what we need. I think that's the path to success in the future. Learning what fighting is, right? Is fighting running around the halls of Congress screaming at your colleagues? No, that's just being a child. Fighting means persuading. As Paul just said, you've got to understand the legislation, be creative with it, be innovative, and persuade people with it. That's fighting. That's what we have to do. That's what we have failed. Well, we haven't failed. I mean, look, we're on the verge of failing because of this inner conflict in our party. It's so important to realize that. And it's so important to understand what that entertainment wing that Paul's talking about is really doing. They're very self-serving. They use that sort of resentment politics, the purity politics, I'm fighting against the establishment for you. Like, what the hell does that mean? They use it to raise money. They know that people will donate to it. And it's completely self-serving. And when I say they, it could be politicians, could be people, influencers on social media, could be pundits as well. It's all the same. The incentive structure is the same. And here's the worst part. Oftentimes, they become stronger personally if we're losing as a movement. There's an incentive to lose. I'm not saying they all fall into this category, but there seems to me to be an incentive to lose for some of the more extreme on this wing. So the way to the future is having the best of both worlds. You can't totally exclude this new age of entertainment and politics. Again, I kind of created a lot of it. Like, I'm kind of a pioneer in it. Not kind of. I mean, I'm going to give myself some credit. I think I am. I have this podcast. We do crazy videos. I mean, we have a lot of fun with what we do. But that's all for naught if we're not adding substance to it, if we're not adding sophistication to it. It is so important. It's so important to remember, and it's important to remember, do not reward the bad behavior, the manufactured divisions that are occurring right now by some of these people, both the entertainment side and, on the other side, the ones they attack. And it's all bad. It's all wrong. We need to get our heads straight, and we're going to win as a result. That's all, folks. Thanks.